All right, that big news out of Dallas today. Mike McCarthy, no longer the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. That is, of course, been confirmed by our lead NFL insider, Jonathan Jones. Sources are saying the two sides, couldn't come to an agreement under a new deal there. McCarthy and the Cowboys became the first team since the 1970 AFL-NFL merger to win at least 12 games 3 years in a row and then not make a conference championship. And that's what it's all about in Dallas. The playoffs, getting to the Super Bowl, getting to a conference championship. Dallas's last playoff outing, we know how that went against the Packers last season. Let's welcome in our lead NFL insider, Jonathan Jones. JJ, McCarthy out as the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. Of course, hearing that the two sides couldn't come to terms as far as length of the contract, but how is the timing of when they decided to part ways ultimately impact their search and landing some of the top candidates out there?
Yeah, so Mike McCarthy was under a 5-year contract with the Dallas Cowboys. Sources had told me that he shouldn't accept anything less than a 4-year contract extension from the Cowboys. It seems rather clear and obvious that the Cowboys were offering fewer years than Mike McCarthy wanted to sign up for, so there was at least some want to on Dallas' side, and I guess maybe they thought that Mike McCarthy over time would agree to whatever they had out there, and hopefully we will find out more about what exactly that offer was. So, because they are a week behind, right, they're going to have to move quickly. And I just reported on CBSSports.com that as part of a mandatory step in the NFL's hiring process, teams have to go through inclusive hiring training. And the Dallas Cowboys, within an hour of firing or parting ways with Mike McCarthy, are already going through that process. So you can argue they wasted time in a week, but after they made the decision, they are wasting no time. And part of that is because they have a deadline of tonight. If they wish to interview any coaching candidates with the Detroit Lions or the Kansas City Chiefs, those would be initial interviews, those would be virtual interviews. So we're talking about Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn, about Matt Nagy and Steve Spagnuolo. What I can tell you is what I also reported on Sunday night on the NFL Today, that Ben Johnson has done his interviews. He's packed it up, and he is all focused on the Lions game against the Washington Commanders on Saturday. So I would not believe that he would be interested, if there is any interest from Dallas's side, in Ben Johnson, because he is solely and singularly focused on the task at hand, beating the Washington Commanders. And so they just are getting through this mandatory step. We will see as things continue who all they wind up requesting to interview currently on teams. One name that I talked about earlier today that I've written about, that folks around the league are keeping a very close eye on, Bill Belichick, who has quite the relationship with Jerry Jones. That is someone who, with a $10 million buyout at Carolina, what is $10 million to Jerry Jones, who owns the most valuable franchise in the world and in world history when it comes to sports? And so we'll see how all of that begins to develop. No real solid candidates right now for Dallas, but at least they can start talking to people as soon as, well, frankly, right about now.
Yeah, and you know, everyone was saying, hey, but Bill has this $10 million buyout. But to your point, JJ, if there's anybody that can afford it, that's certainly Jerry Jones. So the Cowboys, they are going to be looking for a new head coach. That's something the Steelers are not going to be doing, despite 6 straight playoff losses. The Steelers have no plans reportedly to move on from Mike Tomlin. And still, JJ, there's a lot of folks out there wondering why not move on from him.
Yeah, I don't know why they're wondering that. I'm not sure how this even got legs. There's not been any interest from the Pittsburgh Steelers. There's not been any interest from Mike Tomlin to move on. This is about as big a non-story as there possibly could be. He signed a 3-year contract extension. He's paid among the highest in the NFL. He has a no-trade clause. So, you know, usually you could hear that and say, yeah, he's probably not going anywhere. Will there be staff changes? Sure, probably, after a season that was ultimately disappointing. If you go back to the beginning of the year, there were some folks who would have been surprised if I told you the Pittsburgh Steelers were going to the playoffs, and certainly they petered out down the end of the stretch, right? They lost 5 straight games, all of whom to either playoff teams or teams that could have been in the playoffs. I'm talking about, of course, the Cincinnati Bengals there in the regular season finale. So no, I feel like we have to go through this every year because enough people have tweeted about it, wondering if he could be fired or if he could be traded. And every single time the Rooney family tells us that they love Mike Tomlin. And so I think we should listen to their actions, and he's not going anywhere.
Yeah, he hasn't had a losing season, and still, if he's not winning a Super Bowl, folks are going to tweet about it. So that's just the world we live in, JJ. But let's talk about Mike Vrabel. He's back home in New England. The Patriots officially introducing him as the new head coach today. So here's more from that intro presser. Take a listen.
There are going to be some things like I'm not Bill, and I'm not Bill Cowher. I'm not anyone other than me, and I've taken those experiences and I've tried to form what I believe is critical to the success of a football team and an organization. But to say what those are going to look like, hopefully just as successful.
Yeah, Vrabel saying, I'm not Bill, and I'm just me, and I feel like that is the right outlook if you have to fill big shoes like that. But what's going to be different this time around versus the Gerard Mayo hire, in your opinion, JJ?
I think there's going to be an attention to detail there with the New England Patriots. Obviously, there's going to be some veteran experience. You're talking about two former Patriot linebackers in Gerard Mayo and Mike Vrabel. So there's going to be some very similar thought processes, and then there's also not going to be. Mike Vrabel has skins on the wall. He has an AFC title game appearance with Ryan Tannehill as his quarterback. He has a 2021 NFL Coach of the Year trophy. He was sought after by just about every team that had an opening or would have an opening. And so I think that is the big difference here. When Robert Kraft and Jonathan Kraft met down the stretch of the regular season with Gerard Mayo and listened to his plan for the future, they did not feel enthused. They did not feel confident in moving forward with him. That's why we saw his dismissal about an hour after that regular season finale. And obviously they had their eye on Mike Vrabel. We saw just the video there from when they inducted him into the Patriots Hall of Fame during the Tennessee Titans bye week. They had always had interest in Mike Vrabel, but could you get him? Especially while he was winning in Tennessee, especially when you had coach in waiting written into Gerard Mayo's contract? No, you couldn't. Now he's available. And I get the question a lot. Would they have gone with Mike Vrabel if Gerard Mayo had won some more games? Or did they fire Gerard Mayo because Mike Vrabel was available? I don't know that it's an either or. It can be both, because he didn't win enough games, Gerard Mayo, because they didn't like the direction and future that he had given them with his plan, and because Mike Vrabel was available. Maybe the answer for the Crafts was quite obvious and clear, just like it was to the entire NFL, and that's why Sunday's news of him officially being the head coach, that was no surprise to anyone attached to football.
Yeah, I felt like that was one of the surefire pairs that we were talking about. It felt like a long time coming. JJ, we certainly appreciate it talking to us about the Cowboys, the Steelers, and the Patriots. Getting a look at the NFL head coaching carousel. There are 6 positions open. It was 7, but now the Patriots, of course, replacing Gerard Mayo with Mike Vrabel and officially introducing him as the new head coach today. The Saints, the Bears, Jets, Jags, Raiders, and Cowboys still have some big decisions to make. This is Ryan Wilson's latest mock draft. You can catch it right now on CBSSports.com, but this is how he thinks 1 through 10 are going to work out. The Titans sticking with that #1 overall pick, taking Cam Ward out of Miami, and then Shedeur Sanders going #2 overall to Cleveland. We have the Giants going with 2A star Travis Hunter. So we have 2 guys from Colorado in this latest mock going in the top 3. Calvin Banks there going to New England. They have their quarterback of the future, as mentioned, in Drake May. And then with the Jacksonville Jaguars going the D-line route with Mason Graham. We're going to talk team needs with our NFL draft expert, Ryan Wilson, and we're going to talk about the Patriots, Ryan, because step #1 for them was finding a new head coach. They did just that, to no one's surprise, and Mike Vrabel officially announcing him as their head coach today at a press conference. But what are the areas of need that they need to address in the upcoming draft?
Hey, Jacqueline, good to see you. When you're Patriots and you're picking 4th, you probably have a ton of needs. Luckily, quarterback isn't one of them. They got that right last year with Drake May, but you have to protect Drake May. They've drafted what felt like 1 million interior offensive linemen the last few years. This year, you have to get an offensive tackle. That has to be one of the primary needs, and you saw that in my mock draft. You mentioned Kelvin Banks Jr. But here's some other needs, depending on how the draft board falls in front of you. If Travis Hunter's there, and you happen to have needs, add wide receiver and cornerback. Christian Gonzalez was a fantastic pick a few years ago. Get him some help in Travis Hunter. That's a run up the card and make that pick type of situation. And then if you want to help out Keon White, the only real edge rusher you have that's still pretty young on the roster, Abdul Carter, makes a ton of sense as well. I had him going just outside I had him going 8 there, to the Panthers. He could go higher than that. He's a juiced up edge rusher out of Penn State, and him opposite Keon White sounds exciting, but ideally number one would be the offensive tackle situation. If they don't address that in free agency, run that card up. Kelvin Banks Jr., even Will Campbell at LSU makes a ton of sense. And then you can move on and make sure you get that quarterback protected as you look towards the rest of the draft.
Yeah, and the good thing about Travis Hunter is, if you have a wide receiver need, a corner need, he can maybe fit one or both of those. Maybe not the same snap count that we saw in college, but he is a two-way star for a reason. Let's go to the Dallas Cowboys. They still need to figure out who their next head coach is going to be. It's not going to be Mike McCarthy. That news coming down today, but it feels like, Ryan, they need to get some sort of a run game going. We saw them struggle in that department a lot this last season, and it feels like Ashton Genty, who has been the star running back of college football, feels like a good fit there.
Yeah, I think, at one point I counted 20 teams where Ashton Genty would be a good fit in the first round. That's how special he is. And by the way, shout out to Jerry Jones for not letting Mike McCarthy interview last week with the Bears and then decided not to re-up him. That's a baller move, as the kids say. Kids don't say that. But in terms of what the Cowboys need, they need a ton of things. They got to get healthy with their quarterback situation. Obviously, Ashton Genty would make a ton of sense. They moved on from Zeke Elliott. They get help at the linebacker position. DeMarvion Overshown had that serious knee injury. He might miss some or all of next season, and he was playing really well before the injury. Jahad Campbell at Alabama, who just announced he's still 20 years old. He is an absolute dude, and he's going to make himself some money as we get through this draft process, and we talk more about him. I actually had him going to the Cowboys in my last mock draft. And then if you want a wide receiver, and they need wide receivers, and Tedrow McMillan happens to be sitting there, if he falls to 12, the tall wide receiver out of Arizona, I think that would make a ton of sense as well to help out CeeDee Lamb. He is an absolute dude as well. I've talked to scouts who compared him to a more athletic version of Drake London. So that should get you excited if you're a Cowboys fan. Of course, Jacqueline, you got to find the head coach, and we'll see how that plays itself out. But they still going to have the 12th pick no matter what, even if they don't have a coach and Jerry Jones is making the pick. So I think those three names make a lot of sense depending on which direction the organization wants to go first as they try this rebuild.
All right, let's talk about your beloved Steelers, because you have quarterback, wide receiver, and corner listed as some of their needs. Starting with the quarterback, Ryan, do you foresee them trading up to get another one in the draft, or maybe taking a bridge quarterback and addressing those other needs first? How do you see it playing out for Pittsburgh?
Another shout out, Jacqueline, to your professionalism for not laughing in my face because I give you such a hard time about your Jacksonville Jaguars and Florida Gators, but you deliver that like you were being neutral. So thank you for that. Here's the thing.
I do my best.
Back in December 2023, I sent out a tweet that said, hey, do you think the Steelers might want to trade up for a player like Michael Penix Jr.? And I got a lot of pushback. Michael Penix Jr. is not that good. The Steelers don't need to do that. Kenny Pickett can still figure it out. Well, Kenny Pickett didn't figure it out. Michael Penix Jr. might actually be pretty good. And the Steelers had a history of trading up from 20 to 10 a few years ago to get a linebacker. So I'll revisit that question now. If Shedeur Sanders happens to fall, the Steelers are picking 21st, and he's there 10 or 11. Do you trade up for him? I would scream yes, because we've heard nonstop chatter about how the Steelers want to move on or perhaps trade Mike Tomlin because they can't get over the hump. The issue is that Mike Tomlin is such a good coach, he can win with terrible quarterback play. So they win 9 games every year. They're never in a position to take a quarterback. But if they decide to stick with Russ, and that's certainly a realistic possibility, he's been above average, no doubt about it. Emeka Egbuka would make a ton of sense as a wide receiver opposite George Pickens. He's as professional a wide receiver as there is in this draft class, and I mean that with the highest respect and praise because he is so good at what he does. And then Jahdae Barron, the cornerback slash nickelback out of Texas, has had a fantastic season, and he reminds me a lot of Brian Branch in terms of his versatility and playmaking ability, and actually had him going to the Steelers in my last mock draft. But Egbuka or Barron, I love. I don't even hate the idea of trading for Stewart should he slip to 10 or 11 or 12, Jacqueline, just to bring some excitement to that quarterback room and have someone that you trust and can build a team around as opposed to a free agent you signed or traded for at the last minute.
Ryan, I have been telling all of the Mike Tomlin doubters in the office, and there are quite a few of them, I'm sure you can guess who they are, that Mike Tomlin has been able to take this team to the playoffs despite not having a quarterback since Big Ben, okay? And I do like the Bengals, so it takes a lot from me, but my dad's from West Mifflin. I do have some Steelers blood, so I do feel a sense of loyalty to Mike Tomlin. Ryan, we certainly